In the early hours of a quiet morning, the world felt completely normal. People were waking up, checking their phones, boiling tea, getting ready for work, and planning their day like usual. Nobody imagined that within minutes, the entire planet would change. It started with something very small, something so simple that most people ignored it at first. Phone signals became weak, then completely died. Internet connections failed. News channels cut off mid-sentence. Even radios began producing only static. All of this happened so fast that people did not even have time to think about what was going wrong at first. Many assumed it was just another temporary breakdown. These things happen sometimes, especially in crowded cities. But soon, people noticed something different. Every device failed at the same time. Every country reported the same silence on the airwaves. Pilots flying airplanes said their instruments were flickering. Ship captains saw their navigation screens go black. Scientists at large observatories reported something unusual passing through the atmosphere, something that was interfering with everything electrical. Then came the light. People all over the world saw bright streaks rushing across the sky. Some thought they were meteors. Others believed they were pieces of satellites falling back to Earth. But these streaks moved too smoothly, too perfectly. They did not scatter randomly. They followed paths that were far too straight. People stood outside their homes, staring upward, trying to record videos on phones that no longer worked. At sea, fishermen saw something hit the water far away, raising a tall column of steam. The sound reached them seconds later, a deep echo that shook the surface of the ocean. In mountain areas, hikers felt the ground tremble as something slammed into the earth, leaving behind a strange round crater. Local authorities rushed to the site, expecting to find a fallen rock or a broken satellite. Instead, they found something none of them had ever seen before: metal fragments that looked like part of a machine, but not a machine from Earth. Crater looked too perfect, almost like someone had carved it with intention. The fragments were smooth, reflective, and light in weight, but stronger than steel. Scientists who examined them said they did not match any known material. They also did not show signs of natural burning like normal meteorites. This created confusion and fear. Something had struck Earth, but nobody knew what or why. All around the world, people were worried. Some crowded around old battery-powered radios, hoping for news. Others gathered in public spaces, watching the skies, wondering if more strange lights would appear. Many felt as if the world had paused for a moment, waiting for the next piece of the puzzle. Governments held emergency meetings. Research centers and military bases were put on alert. Some leaders assured their people that everything was under control, but even they were unsure of what was happening. The communication blackout made it difficult for countries to coordinate. Teams were formed to study the fragments found in different regions. Scientists wanted to understand what had hit Earth and whether more were coming. One of these teams, made up of experts from different countries, was sent to study the crater in the mountain region. They found that the metal pieces were warm, even after hours of lying on the ground. They also emitted a faint energy signal. But when the team tried to detect the signal with traditional equipment, nothing worked. It was as if the fragments produced something outside normal human understanding. As the team gathered samples, a strange pattern caught their attention. The crater did not appear random. The angle of impact suggested it was aimed at that specific location. The team members looked at each other, silently wondering the same question. Who or what could aim something so precisely from the sky? Meanwhile, more reports came in. Coastal villages reported unusual waves. Pilots in the air said they saw moving objects just outside the atmosphere, objects that changed direction faster than any aircraft on Earth. People in remote desert areas saw flashes of white light that vanished instantly. Something was happening on a global scale, For the first time in human history, almost every country felt the same fear at the same moment. As day turned into evening, more information finally began to flow again. Scientists managed to restore partial communication networks. Government spokespersons appeared on emergency channels, asking people to stay calm and avoid spreading rumors. But even their calm voices could not hide the tension beneath their words. By late night, the research team studying the fragments finally made a breakthrough. They discovered patterns within the material, like tiny circuits carved at the smallest scale imaginable. These did not belong to nature. They were artificial, and the energy readings inside the material suggested it had been part of an engineered device. The conclusion felt heavy to everyone in the room. Someone sent these objects. The world began to understand a frightening truth. This was not a meteor shower. It was not space debris. It was not an accident. Earth had been struck on purpose. This realization spread slowly at first, then suddenly like wildfire. People gathered around whatever screens or devices were working. Families sat together, trying to stay calm. In many cities, traffic stopped. People abandoned their cars and simply stared at the sky. Even though it was dark, many felt as if something was watching from above. Military satellites, though damaged, detected faint signals coming from the outer part of the solar system. These signals were not natural. Their timing was too organized. Their strength was too stable. And the signals seemed to be focused in Earth's direction. The research team shared their findings with global leaders. The impact sites were not random at all. Someone was testing Earth's surface. The ocean strike appeared to measure depth and pressure. The mountain strike measured density. Some smaller strikes in empty regions appeared to test Earth's electromagnetic field. Whoever sent these objects was gathering information. People tried to comfort themselves by believing it was a scientific probe, maybe from a peaceful civilization. But the precision, the power, and the damage caused by the impacts did not feel like peaceful exploration. The team studying the fragments found no signs of messages, no attempt to communicate, and no safety measures meant to protect human life. The objects acted like tools, not greetings. The Global Council, formed in response, knew one thing clearly. This was not friendly contact. Late that night, as the world waited for answers, a small news station managed to broadcast again. The host, speaking in a nervous voice, explained what scientists were beginning to believe. Something intelligent had struck Earth, and the strikes were too controlled to be mistakes. Many viewers sat in complete silence as they listened. For generations, humanity had wondered what might exist beyond Earth. Now they were getting an answer, and it was not the comforting one many imagined. The next morning, people woke up with a new awareness. The sky looked the same, but it did not feel the same. People stepped outside their homes with caution. Children asked their parents what was happening. Adults pretended to be calm, even though their hearts felt uneasy. Everyone carried the same thought. If something had struck Earth once, what would stop it from happening again? The research team, working around the clock, continued examining the fragments. They found unusual energy patterns inside them, unlike anything on Earth. These patterns behaved almost like signals, reacting to electromagnetic waves around them. When one of the scientists brought a radio device close, the fragment pulsed faintly, as if responding. The team members watched nervously. These were not simple pieces of metal. They had purpose. Reports came in from 3 more countries claiming similar energy readings near their own impact sites. It was becoming clear that Earth had not been hit by just 1 or 2 objects. There were too many to explain as coincidence. Global leaders now faced a truth they could no longer hide or soften. Something beyond Earth had acted against the planet, and nobody knew what would happen next. And in that quiet, uncertain moment, humanity realized that Earth was not alone in the universe. It had never been alone. And whatever had struck the planet had done it with intention. The world understood a single terrifying truth. The first strike had already happened. What came next would decide everything. The research team that had been studying the strange fragments worked without rest. Nobody complained. Nobody asked for a break. They all understood that something serious was happening, something that could not wait. The world outside their lab was confused and frightened, and everyone hoped that maybe this team would discover something that could help. The metal pieces from the sky were unlike anything they had ever seen, and the silence around them felt heavy, as if the whole planet was holding its breath. Early the next morning, a scientist discovered something unusual inside one of the fragments. When the piece was placed under a special scanner, it produced strange patterns of light. These patterns did not match any natural element or any human-made design. They moved smoothly, almost like they were alive, almost like they were trying to follow some kind of instruction. The scientist called the others and showed them what he found. For a moment, none of them said anything. They simply stared at the screen, trying to understand what the patterns meant. They tried testing the fragment with different tools, but every test showed the same thing. The object was not simply metal. It was a combination of engineered material, energy storage, and microscopic structures that could only be created by a very advanced technology. This discovery made the team uneasy. If someone had built something like this, then that someone was far more advanced than any human civilization. While the scientists were trying to understand the object, something else was happening in the sky. Military observers detected faint signals from deep space far beyond the moon. These signals were slow, steady, and too organized to be natural. They came from the same direction as the earlier streaks of light. At first, the experts thought they were echoes of the fragments breaking apart. But when they studied the pattern, they realized it was actually a transmission, a message, a signal directed toward Earth. But it was not a message that humans could understand. It had no language, no understandable structure. It didn't even seem like a form of communication made for conversation. Instead, it looked like a tracking signal, almost like someone was marking Earth, the same way a person might mark a location on a map. This discovery increased the fear across the world. People were already worried after the strikes, but now governments began to understand that the earlier impacts were not accidents. They were testing Earth. The scientists explained that the signal from space seemed to be responding to the fragments on the ground. It was checking if they had landed correctly. It was checking the strength of the atmosphere, the heat of impact, and the magnetic field around the planet. No one knew how to explain this to the public without causing even more panic. Many people around the world had their own theories. Some thought that a large asteroid would hit next. Others believed countries were attacking each other secretly. But a quiet fear started spreading that the truth might be even bigger. People began asking if Earth was being studied by something not from this world, something they could not see or understand. Late in the afternoon, things took a frightening turn. An object appeared in the sky again, but this time it did not streak across like the earlier ones. Instead, it slowed down, entered low orbit, and became clearly visible on military cameras. It was shaped like a smooth oval, with no windows, no markings, and no visible engines. It moved silently, gliding above Earth as if it were scanning every detail below. People who looked up at the sky couldn't see it with their eyes, but the footage shown to world leaders made everyone inside the meeting room fall silent. The object moved too smoothly to be human technology. It rotated slowly, releasing a faint glow that spread across the clouds. It was taking its time, as if observing everything. For hours, nothing happened. People continued to go about their evenings, unaware of what hung silently above them. Then, without warning, the object fired a beam of light at a remote island. The light was quick, quiet, and incredibly precise. It flashed for only a second, but the island below was covered in a wave of bright heat. When the beam ended, cameras showed empty land where the island had been. There were no explosions, no debris flying into the air. The island simply vanished, melted down into steaming water that global leaders watched in disbelief. Scientists struggled to understand what kind of energy could do something like that without causing shockwaves. The room remained silent for a long moment. Everyone understood what this meant. It was not a greeting. It was not a peaceful visit. It was a demonstration. Whoever controlled that object wanted Earth to see what they could do. The object did nothing else. It didn't attack any cities or people. After a few more minutes, it floated upward slowly, then shot into the distance so fast that even the fastest human satellites could barely track it. Within moments, it was gone. Once the footage was shared privately with scientists and specialists, a new fear settled in. The beam wasn't meant to destroy Earth. It was meant to show power, too. Show that whoever sent it could eliminate anything they wanted. And the fact that they chose an empty island proved that the strike was carefully planned. It felt like a message saying, "We don't need to fight you. We can simply remove you whenever we want." And yet, there was no direct communication. No formal statement. No request. Only actions. The next day, governments all over the world decided they had to work together. Competition, politics, and disagreements suddenly felt small. A global emergency council was formed. Scientists, leaders, and military experts sat together, sharing whatever information they had. Everyone understood that Earth was facing something completely unknown, something far more advanced than any human technology. For the first time in many years, nations cooperated without hesitation. Because the threat was not against one country, it was against all humans. The research team studying the metal fragments shared their findings with the council. They explained that the fragments were not simple probes. They were tools, possibly parts of a larger system used to evaluate planets. They could measure temperature, energy levels, water pressure, and atmosphere. They were part of a detailed examination. The team believed the objects were gathering information for someone or something far away. One expert said something that made the room fall silent. He explained that the objects and the beam attack made Earth look like a place being surveyed, not visited. In his words, it looked like someone was inspecting Earth the same way humans inspected land before building something on it, or before taking something from it. This thought made everyone uncomfortable, people outside unaware of. These discussions were also growing uneasy. Many felt like the atmosphere around them had changed. Even though the sky looked the same, people felt watched. The silence after the attack on the island felt almost louder than the event itself. People gathered around old radios, waiting for official announcements, hoping someone would explain. Everything clearly. By evening, the Global Council realized that the world needed to know what was happening. But they also understood that panic could make the situation even worse. So they prepared a message that explained the situation in simple terms. They said that Earth had been struck by unknown objects, and that experts were studying them. They also confirmed that something had appeared in orbit. They did not mention the island incident, fearing it would cause fear too great to handle. People accepted the announcement with mixed feelings. Some felt safer knowing that leaders were taking action. Others felt more worried because the situation had no clear answers. Many families stayed together that night, keeping their children close, not wanting to be alone. Meanwhile, the research team realized something else. The signals from deep space were changing. They were no longer steady. They were becoming sharper, stronger, and more frequent. The team believed this meant that whoever sent the earlier objects was sending new instructions. It felt like the first stage was complete, and a second stage was beginning. The team did not know what that second stage would be. In a quiet moment, late at night, one of the researchers stood outside the facility. He looked up at the stars, thinking about how humanity had always wondered if it was alone. People had dreamed about finding peaceful life somewhere in the universe. But now, he felt that humans were not prepared. Not for this. The galaxy suddenly felt much larger, much colder, and much more dangerous. He took a deep breath, knowing that the world had changed forever. Something had struck Earth first. Something had shown power beyond anything humans could defend against. And whatever it was still out there, watching, planning. The researcher understood what humanity was beginning to realize. This was only the beginning. Night passed slowly, and when the sun finally rose, the world woke up to a new reality. A reality where the sky was no longer just the sky, and Earth was no longer just a home. It was something being studied, measured, and judged by something far away. And the most frightening part was that nobody knew what would happen next. After the terrifying attacks from the sky, the world had changed completely. People were still, waking up to the idea that Earth was not alone, that it had been watched and tested, and that the beings responsible were far more advanced than anything humans had built. Fear was everywhere, but so was determination. Leaders and scientists alike understood that if humanity waited passively, it would be easy prey. They decided to act. They decided to fight back. Scientists and engineers from many countries were gathered in one location, working together as one team. People who had spent years competing suddenly found themselves on the same side. Laboratories that once focused on small studies were now building something the world had never seen before. They collected every bit of data from the fragments that had fallen. Every detail was studied. Every energy reading was logged. The team wanted to understand what they were dealing with, and more importantly, they wanted to find a way to defend themselves. It was not easy. The materials in the fragments reacted in strange ways. They absorbed energy, reflected it, and sometimes pulsed with light as if alive. No existing computer could fully calculate the energy patterns. Scientists worked around the clock, often, sleeping only a few hours before returning to the lab. Engineers designed new machines to test the fragments safely. Some of the younger scientists were afraid. The fragments had destroyed islands, tested oceans, and seemed capable of destroying cities. But everyone pushed through the fear, knowing that failure was not an option. Meanwhile, the military observed the skies more closely than ever. Radar and satellite networks were repaired and expanded. They watched for any sign of objects approaching Earth, knowing that if something appeared, it might not be friendly. Training drills were conducted in secret. Soldiers, pilots, and naval crews were taught how to respond to attacks, unlike anything they had faced. Even then, nobody could fully imagine what the enemy was capable of. In the laboratory, the research team finally discovered a way to use the fragments to their advantage. They realized that the fragments' energy patterns could be mimicked. If they built a machine that could generate the same energy pulses, they might be able to neutralize attacks or disable enemy devices. This idea sparked hope. It was not a weapon for destroying cities. It was a shield for protecting them. Engineers immediately began designing what they called a hybrid defensive system. It would combine human technology with the unknown energy of the fragments. Testing the first prototype was tense. The machine had to handle enormous power without exploding. The first trial caused lights to flicker in nearby towns and small electrical devices to fail. But it worked. The energy pulse disrupted small pieces of alien material placed nearby. Scientists and engineers watched in awe. They had just created a tool that could challenge the attackers, at least in a small way. News of the global effort could not be shared with the public yet. Panic would have spread if people knew exactly what the military and scientists were doing. But behind the scenes, the cooperation among nations was unprecedented. The world had never faced a threat that required such unity. Research teams from every continent sent ideas, machines, and workers. It was a race against time. Every day without progress felt like a day closer to disaster. Then, a new strike occurred. The attackers returned, but this time they fired at populated cities. Their beams moved with precision, aiming for power plants and major infrastructure. Panic erupted in affected areas. Citizens ran into streets, looking for cover. However, the military had learned quickly. The hybrid defensive systems were deployed for the first time in a live test. The pulse shields worked better than anyone expected. Beams that would have destroyed buildings were distorted, weakened, and sometimes completely stopped. A small alien drone that had flown too close was thrown off course and fell into the sea. Soldiers and scientists watched on screens, hardly daring to believe it. Humanity had finally stopped an attack. It was not victory, but it was proof. The attackers could be challenged. After the attack, leaders called an emergency meeting. They discussed what had happened and what must be done next. Everyone agreed that the hybrid system alone was not enough. Earth needed something larger, something capable of defending the entire planet. Scientists suggested building a network of shields and energy pulse stations around key cities, oceans, and infrastructure. They also recommended using fragments to understand the enemy's patterns, predicting where and how the next attack might happen. The global effort expanded. Factories ran day and night to produce energy pulse equipment. Engineers worked on energy storage, capable of delivering massive power bursts. Satellites were repurposed to monitor alien movements. Even ordinary citizens contributed. People volunteered for testing, building, or transporting materials. Fear remained, but hope grew alongside it. Humanity had found a reason to fight together, and that reason was survival. In one of the laboratories, a scientist made an unexpected discovery. The fragments emitted tiny pulses of a signal that seemed to react to human technology. When certain frequencies were broadcasted near the fragments, they pulsed in a coordinated way. The scientist realized this could be used to confuse or interfere with the enemy's devices. They could send signals into the sky that would make it difficult for attackers to control their beams or machines. It was a form of defense that no human weapon had ever had before. The idea was implemented quickly. Satellites and ground stations were fitted with devices to broadcast these confusing signals. During the next alien approach, the systems worked in tandem with the pulse shields. The attackers' beams started to misfire, missing their targets. A small ship that attempted to enter low orbit was disrupted and crashed harmlessly into the ocean. For the first time, humans had not only survived an attack, they had caused the attackers to fail. As news of the success reached the council, a sense of cautious relief spread. People began to believe that humanity was not helpless. They still feared what might come next, but they also realized something new. They were capable of defending themselves. For the first time, the world experienced a mixture of fear and confidence. The attackers were dangerous, but Earth was no longer defenseless. Even with these successes, the scientists and military knew they could not become overconfident. Fragments suggested that the attackers were calculating and cautious. They would not make mistakes forever. If humans relaxed, they could face destruction again. Preparation became a daily habit. Every day, new strategies were tested, new machines were built, and new signals were studied. Earth had entered a long period of learning and adaptation. While humans worked tirelessly, ordinary citizens lived with a new understanding. They had seen destruction, experienced fear, and now watched as science and courage provided protection. People began to appreciate the small things, their homes, their families, and the knowledge that they could survive something much larger than themselves. Communities came together to share information, resources, and support. Even simple acts, like keeping watch at night or sharing battery power, became a form of resistance. In the evenings, people would look up at the sky, remembering the streaks of light and the vanished island. They wondered what else was out there. Children asked questions, and adults tried to answer. For the first time in human history, everyone realized that survival was not guaranteed, and that it depended on unity, courage, and the cleverness of humans working together. The research team continued to study every new fragment, signal, and anomaly. Each discovery led to another question, and each success led to more hope. They understood that this was only the beginning of humanity's fight for survival. If the attackers returned, they would be ready in ways that no one could have imagined. Before the first strike, night after night, humans looked at the stars and thought of the beings that had tested Earth. There was fear, yes, but also determination. The attackers might be stronger, faster, and more advanced, but humans had something they had never used in space before: unpredictability, creativity, and unity. These qualities, the scientists and leaders believed, would be the key to surviving. The next strike, the world changed, not only because of fear, but because of action. Ordinary people became part of an extraordinary effort. Scientists became heroes for their discoveries. Soldiers became heroes for their courage. Even engineers and factory workers became heroes because they provided the tools that could protect. Millions. Everyone played a role in defending Earth, and in the quiet moments, when lights flickered and machines hummed, people realized something powerful. Humanity had learned to fight back. The first attacks had shown them how fragile they were, but the response had shown them how strong they could be. Earth was no longer a passive planet, waiting to be destroyed. It was becoming a planet that could fight, resist, and survive. First countermeasures were in place. Cities were protected. Signals from space were being monitored. Scientists had developed new technologies from the fragments, and the military had learned how to use them. Humans had turned fear into action, and in doing so, they had taken the first real steps toward defending their home. The attacks had started the war, but humanity had started something else as well: a global effort to survive, adapt, and protect everything they had built. The next challenge would be even greater, but the people of Earth were no longer waiting. They were ready to fight back, using their minds, their courage, and their unity. And though the attackers had not been defeated yet, for the first time, humanity had seen that they could be resisted. For the first time, hope had returned to Earth. Weeks after humanity's first successful defense were filled with tension and preparation. People could not forget the streaks of light in the sky, the strange metal fragments, and the vanished island. Even though the hybrid shields had worked, everyone knew the attackers were not gone. They had shown their power, and humans had barely responded. The world understood that the real challenge was still ahead. Military forces were on constant alert. Aircraft flew in formation, scanning the sky, while naval ships patrolled oceans with energy sensors from the fragments attached to them. Soldiers trained endlessly, learning how to operate new hybrid pulse devices that could disrupt the alien energy beams. Ground crews practiced coordinating with satellites and defense stations, making sure that no area would be left unprotected. Everyone knew that the next attack could come without warning, and preparation became a full-time effort for millions of people. Scientists and engineers continued working side by side. They studied every fragment recovered, looking for new patterns, new energy behaviors, and ways to predict the enemy's movements. They discovered that the fragments reacted to specific frequencies, which allowed humans to manipulate their energy for defense purposes. Every new discovery made the team feel more confident, even as they realized the enemy's technology was far beyond anything humans had ever built. Then the attack began again. It was not small. It was precise. Alien ships appeared above Earth's atmosphere, gliding silently, moving in formations that humans had never seen before. Their surfaces were smooth, reflective, and completely alien. No lights, no engines, no signs of pilots. They seemed alive in some way, moving with a strange intelligence. Beams of energy were fired at major cities. Power grids flickered and failed. Communication lines broke. People panicked, running into streets or seeking shelter. The cities had warnings, but the attackers moved faster than anyone expected. For the first time, humanity faced a direct assault. That could have been devastating if the hybrid defenses had not been ready. The defense systems were activated. The hybrid shields pulsed with energy that rippled across the cities, distorting the alien beams. Buildings that would have been destroyed stood firm. Electrical systems flickered, but remained functional. Satellites sent signals that confused the attackers' energy patterns, making some beams miss entirely. For the first time, humans fought back in real time, and they did more than survive. They disrupted the attack. A small alien craft attempted to land near a coastal city, but the combination of the hybrid pulses and signal interference caused it to malfunction. It fell into the ocean harmlessly. Scientists studied the wreckage, realizing that the ships were not purely mechanical. They were partially biological, grown in some laboratory far away, with energy systems integrated into their bodies. The attackers were using living machines, creatures designed for destruction and precision. World leaders and scientists held emergency meetings after the first wave of attacks. They understood that the attackers relied on speed, precision, and fear. The more humans panicked, the easier it would be to strike. The military developed new tactics, combining shields, signals, and quick human action to exploit the enemy's reliance on technology. They began coordinating attacks on the alien formations, targeting weak points in the ships that had been discovered from fragments and wreckage. On the ground, people watched the skies in awe and fear. Some filmed the events, while others held loved ones close. Children asked questions that adults struggled to answer. There were moments of chaos and confusion, but also moments of bravery. Ordinary citizens volunteered to help transport supplies, repair damaged equipment, and maintain communication systems. They realized that survival was not just about military forces, it was about every person contributing in some way. The hybrid pulse systems worked even better than the scientists expected. Energy beams from the attackers were blocked or deflected. Some ships lost control and crashed harmlessly. The attackers had never encountered humans who could fight back with this level of coordination. For the first time, the enemy was not completely dominant. Humans were unpredictable, creative, and united. The attackers seemed to realize this as well. As their movements became less organized during the battle, the researchers noticed a pattern. The alien ships responded to certain energy signals in the environment. By broadcasting new frequencies through satellites and ground stations, humans could manipulate the attackers' behavior. Ships that were moving toward cities were forced off course, while others were slowed or disabled. Every small success gave hope to those watching and fighting. Humanity was learning to turn the attackers' own technology against them. After hours of fighting, the first wave ended. Cities were damaged, but standing. Power grids were partially restored. Communication systems worked enough to coordinate further actions. The attackers retreated, moving back into space. For the first time, humans had not only survived an attack, they had made the attackers lose. It was not a total victory, but it was proof that Earth could fight back. Leaders around the world realized that preparation, unity, and innovation were humanity's greatest strengths. Countries that had once competed fiercely now shared every resource, every piece of knowledge, every scientist. Factories worked day and night to produce more energy pulse systems. Engineers developed stronger shields and faster signal disruptors. Military forces practiced new tactics based on the attacker's movements. Everyone was part of the defense. Even ordinary citizens became heroes in their own way. People helped each other rebuild damaged neighborhoods, guided traffic during blackouts, and provided information about strange sightings. Community networks became essential. Schools, hospitals, and local governments organized volunteers to maintain order and protect vulnerable areas. People realized that survival depended not just on technology, but on courage, cooperation, and quick thinking. Meanwhile, the research team continued studying alien fragments. They discovered that the attackers' machines could be temporarily disrupted if humans introduced chaotic signals into their energy fields. This meant that humans could predict some attacks and respond more effectively. Engineers integrated this knowledge into the defense network, creating a layered system of shields, pulses, and signal disruption. The battle had changed humanity. People had always dreamed of reaching the stars, but now they knew the stars could also bring danger. Fear was still present, but it was mixed with determination and pride. Humans had faced something far stronger than themselves and had fought back. The world had learned that unity and intelligence could overcome fear. Even when the odds were overwhelming. After the attack, children still asked about the sky. Adults tried to explain what had happened without causing panic. Scientists and teachers worked together to show that knowledge, courage, and cooperation were the keys to surviving. Families talked about heroes not as invincible soldiers, but as ordinary people who acted with bravery and intelligence. Everyone began to understand that heroism was a choice, not a circumstance. In laboratories, engineers refined the pulse systems. They worked on increasing their range, energy output, and coordination. Satellites were upgraded to detect new approaches from space. Naval and air forces trained for every possible scenario. The attackers had shown that they could destroy, but humans had shown that they could fight. That lesson spread across every continent. The research team also focused on predicting future attacks. By analyzing energy signatures, flight patterns, and fragment behaviors, they could make educated guesses about where the attackers might strike next. This knowledge allowed cities to prepare and defense systems to be placed strategically. Humanity was no longer purely reactive. They were becoming proactive. Despite the victories, there was still fear. Nobody knew who or what the attackers were, or what they wanted. Every success was a temporary relief, and every day carried the possibility of a new, more devastating strike. But even in fear, people found strength. The world had changed, but it had also grown stronger. Humanity had been tested and had passed. The first trials. At night, when cities were quiet and skies were clear, people looked up and thought about the battle. They remembered the streaks of light, the fallen ships, and the courage of those who had defended the planet. Even though the attackers were still out there, humanity had learned something important. Earth was no longer an easy target. Humans could fight back, and they would fight together. The attack had shown weaknesses, but it had also revealed strengths. Technology, intelligence, cooperation, and courage had protected billions. Ordinary citizens, scientists, engineers, and soldiers had all played a role. Humanity had learned that even against a superior enemy, unity and creativity could turn the tide. By the end of the day, the world felt changed. People had survived a direct assault from a force far stronger than themselves. The attackers had been forced to retreat. Earth had survived. But humanity knew that this was only the beginning. The attackers would return, and next time they might come stronger and smarter. Even so, humans were no longer afraid to fight. They had seen the power of unity and intelligence. They had learned that every person mattered in the defense of Earth. And most importantly, they had discovered that they could challenge a force far beyond their world. From the ashes of fear, hope had emerged. Humanity had fought back, learned, and survived. The sky was still full of unknowns, but Earth was no longer a helpless planet. Humans had begun to stand tall, ready for whatever came next, prepared to defend their home with courage, skill, and determination. After the last attack, Earth was quiet for a few days. The cities were damaged, but still standing. Power was slowly restored, and communication networks were being repaired. People went about their daily lives with a new awareness. Even small actions, like checking the skies or listening to emergency broadcasts, reminded everyone that something beyond human understanding had struck their planet. The fear that had settled in hearts all over the world was still there, but it was mixed with a cautious hope. Humans had survived. Humans had fought back, and now they were determined to send a clear message to whoever had attacked them. Earth would not be an easy target. The research team worked tirelessly. They studied wrecked alien ships recovered from the oceans and impact sites. Every piece was examined in microscopic detail. They discovered that the enemy's technology relied on precise energy patterns. If those patterns could be disrupted or mirrored, humans might gain an advantage. Scientists and engineers developed new systems to broadcast confusing signals into space, hoping to interfere with future attacks. These signals were designed not to harm anyone, but to make alien ships lose control of their own technology. It was a quiet, clever kind of defense, unlike anything Earth had ever attempted before. Meanwhile, the military was preparing for another possible strike. Troops, ships, and aircraft trained together using simulations based on the patterns discovered in the fragments. Every soldier understood that the attacks were different from any previous war. They were not fighting another nation, not a group of humans, but something that had far greater knowledge and power. The defense plans had to be fast, creative, and coordinated. Ordinary citizens were asked to help in small ways, like maintaining communication lines, monitoring skies, or volunteering at shelters in case of danger. The entire planet had become part of the defense. One day, satellites detected an unusual signal from deep space. It was different from the previous faint transmissions. It was sharper, longer, and seemed deliberately directed at Earth. Scientists translated the signal into energy patterns they could understand. What they found was terrifying and enlightening at the same time. The aliens, or whatever had attacked Earth, were sending a message. It was not in words, not in language humans could understand. It was in patterns of energy and movement, but it conveyed a clear meaning. Earth had been marked as a volatile resource. In other words, the attackers had considered humanity dangerous and were prepared to remove the planet if humans did not behave according to their expectations. Global Council shared the discovery in private. Leaders understood the weight of the message. Humanity was being tested, judged, and threatened. The reality was hard to accept. The attackers did not want negotiation. They did not want communication. They wanted compliance, or else they would eliminate the threat. The message was cold, simple, and terrifying. It reminded everyone that humanity had survived the first attacks not by luck alone, but by courage, intelligence, and unity. Scientists and engineers met with military leaders to plan the next steps. They decided that Earth could not just wait for attacks. It needed to show strength. If the attackers returned, they had to know that humans could defend themselves, that they were not easy prey. A plan was developed to use the hybrid energy systems to send a signal into deep space. Not a message in language, but a demonstration of power. It would show that Earth had technology capable of disrupting or destroying the attackers' machines. It was a calculated risk, but everyone agreed it was necessary. The signal was prepared carefully. Scientists combined energy from recovered alien fragments with human technology, creating a pulse strong enough to be detected across the solar system. Satellites and ground stations were linked to broadcast the signal simultaneously. Engineers monitored every detail, ensuring that the energy would travel far without harming Earth. It was a tense moment. No one knew what would happen once the pulse was sent. Would the attackers respond immediately? Would they attack harder? Or would they understand the warning? Finally, the pulse was released. The energy traveled outward, faster than the speed of human perception. In the control rooms, scientists and military leaders waited, holding their breath. For hours, nothing happened. Then, faint signals were detected in return. It was not an attack. It was a response in the form of silence and observation. The attackers had noticed the signal. They understood the warning. Earth had shown that it could fight back. People around the world were unaware of the details, but they could feel the change. Airplanes flew with fewer restrictions. Ships navigated the oceans confidently, and families looked at the sky without immediate panic. Attackers were still out there, but humanity had made them reconsider. For the first time, Earth had asserted itself not just through defense, but through strategy and intelligence. The research team did not stop. They knew that survival required constant vigilance. They continued studying alien fragments, improving energy systems, and predicting potential attack patterns. Every day, they discovered new possibilities. Some fragments contained hidden energy storage, some had communication patterns, and others seemed to respond only to certain types of human signals. This knowledge allowed the military to prepare more sophisticated strategies for defense and counterattack. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens adjusted to the new reality. Schools, workplaces, and public spaces incorporated emergency drills. People learned how to respond to warnings and maintain calm during unusual events. Communities shared information about sightings, energy fluctuations, and strange occurrences. People realized that everyone had a role to play, and that cooperation was as important as any weapon or shield. A few months passed, and humanity began to rebuild confidence. Cities repaired damaged infrastructure. Energy systems were strengthened. Satellites monitored the skies continuously. The hybrid energy systems were upgraded and deployed in more locations. People could see progress and felt a sense of pride in their collective efforts. Humanity was no longer simply reacting to threats. It was planning, preparing, and showing resilience. The Global Council decided to take the next step. They authorized the construction of a special interstellar vessel. Its purpose was not only exploration, but also to serve as a beacon and a warning. Powered by both human and alien energy technology, the ship would carry a signal far beyond the solar system, demonstrating that Earth was prepared to defend itself. Scientists, engineers, and astronauts worked together to design and build the ship. Every detail was calculated, every test performed repeatedly. The project became a symbol of human determination. People watched as the ship was completed. The world took notice, feeling both awe and reassurance. Humanity had created something that no one thought possible, combining the unknown technology of the attackers with human creativity and courage. It was a powerful message. Earth had learned, adapted, and would not be destroyed without a fight. Even as the vessel prepared to leave, research teams continued their work. They monitored the skies, studied fragments, and refined defense systems. Every new discovery added to Earth's ability to predict, respond, and survive. Humanity had transformed fear into strength, confusion into strategy, and panic into determination. As the interstellar ship slowly left the solar system, Its energy pulse broadcast outward, carrying a silent but clear message. It did not threaten the attackers with words or weapons, but it demonstrated capability, intelligence, and readiness. The aliens, or whatever was observing Earth, received the signal. This time, there was no attack. This time, there was recognition. Humanity had shown that it could survive, adapt, and respond to threats beyond its world. People on Earth felt a mixture of relief and determination. They knew the attackers were still out there, and they might return. But humanity had learned an important lesson. Survival depended on unity, intelligence, and courage. It depended on every person contributing, no matter how small the role. It depended on refusing to be passive in the face of overwhelming power. Even ordinary citizens became part of history. Families shared stories of courage. Scientists and engineers continued their work, and soldiers trained tirelessly. Communities maintained vigilance. People had discovered that heroism was not about fame or recognition. It was about action, courage, and intelligence in moments that mattered most. The message sent through the interstellar vessel changed Earth's place in the universe. Humanity had shown that it could defend itself, adapt, and respond strategically. The attackers had learned something important. Earth was no longer passive. Humans had begun to control the narrative, turning fear into preparation and survival, into strategy. Night after night, people looked at the stars and thought about what lay beyond. They remembered the attacks, the vanished islands, and the streaks of light. They also remembered the courage of scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens who had defended the planet. The fear remained, but it was now balanced by hope. Humanity had taken the first steps not only to survive, but to assert its presence in the universe. The research team continued to monitor every fragment, signal, and anomaly. They discovered new energy behaviors and improved the hybrid pulse systems. Satellites and ground stations were constantly upgraded. The world had entered a new era of preparedness, where fear was transformed into strategy and observation was transformed into action. The planet itself seemed to sense the change. People moved with determination, worked with purpose, and supported one another. Humanity had proven that it could survive attacks from beings far stronger and more advanced than themselves. They had learned to fight, to plan, and to send a warning that would be understood across space. And while the attackers were still out there, watching and calculating, Earth had begun a new chapter. The first strikes had been terrifying. The next attacks might be even more dangerous. But humans had learned that unity, courage, and intelligence could turn fear into survival. They had learned that every person mattered. They had learned that Earth could fight back. Humanity had survived. Humanity had adapted. And humanity had sent a message. Earth was no longer a helpless planet. Earth was ready. The months after the interstellar vessel was launched were tense, but they were also filled with careful observation and preparation. Humanity had sent a message into space, a demonstration of strength and intelligence, and now the planet waited. People watched the skies, studied the stars, and listened for any sign that the attackers had returned. Every day was a reminder that survival depended on vigilance, but also on courage, creativity, and cooperation. Scientists continued to study the fragments, learning more with every discovery. Some fragments contained energy that could be stored and reused. Others seemed to react to human technology in unexpected ways. The research teams experimented carefully, learning to predict how the alien devices might behave. They developed new hybrid systems, combining human machines with the energy properties of the fragments. Each new system made Earth a little stronger, a little safer, and a little smarter. Military forces also advanced. Soldiers, pilots, and naval crews trained constantly with the hybrid technology. They practiced coordinating attacks, defending cities and protecting civilians. Every soldier understood that the enemy was not like any human opponent they had faced before. The attackers were intelligent, fast, and highly advanced, but humanity had something they could not predict: creativity, courage, and unity. These qualities gave humans an advantage that machines alone could not provide. Communities around the world had also changed. Ordinary people had learned how to act in emergencies, how to support one another, and how to stay calm when fear threatened to overwhelm them. Families taught their children about courage and responsibility. Schools added lessons about teamwork, strategy, and observation. Communities developed networks to share information quickly and efficiently. Humanity had become stronger, not only through technology, but through cooperation and shared purpose. Then, without warning, the sky changed. Alien ships appeared again, moving faster and with more precision than before. Their surfaces reflected the sunlight like mirrors, making them nearly invisible against the sky. They moved silently, but their presence was felt immediately. Energy beams fired from above, targeting key areas in cities, power stations, and communication centers. Panic began to rise, but this time humans were ready. The hybrid energy shields were activated across the planet. Cities glowed with defensive pulses, and satellites transmitted interference signals to confuse the attackers' machines. The beams fired at cities were disrupted, weakened, and misdirected. Some of the ships lost control and fell harmlessly into oceans and unpopulated areas. For the first time, humans were not only defending themselves, they were controlling the battlefield, using strategy, intelligence, and technology to influence the enemy's actions. In the control rooms, scientists monitored every movement, energy reading, and pattern. They noticed that the attackers seemed surprised by humanity's improvements. Their formations were less precise, their beams less effective. Humans were no longer predictable, and this gave the planet an advantage. Engineers quickly adapted, using fragments to send complex energy signals that further disrupted the alien devices. The attackers had never encountered a planet that could fight back so effectively, so intelligently. While the attacks continued, ordinary citizens played their part. People guided emergency teams, repaired power lines, and helped maintain communication networks. Families moved to safer areas, schools served as shelters, and communities shared resources. Everyone understood that survival was not the job of soldiers alone. It was the responsibility of all humanity. Every act of courage, every contribution mattered. The battle lasted for hours. Humans coordinated with precision, combining energy pulses, signal interference, and strategic responses to defend key areas. Each wave of attacks was met with stronger defenses, smarter strategies, and better coordination. The attackers tried to adapt, but humans were already thinking ahead, predicting movements, and countering with creativity. For the first time, Earth was not a passive target. It was a calculating force that could resist, disrupt, and survive. During the battle, scientists discovered something remarkable. The attackers' machines seemed to have a weak point in their energy network. If humans could exploit this vulnerability, they might disable entire formations at once. Engineers designed a new hybrid pulse system, stronger and more precise than any before. It combined human calculations with the energy from the fragments, creating a wave that could interfere with the attacker's entire communication network. This was a turning point. When the new system was activated, the attackers' formations faltered. Ships collided or lost control, beams misfired, and their coordinated attacks broke apart. Human forces took advantage, protecting cities and populations. While the attackers struggled to regain control, people watched from the ground and from skies filled with energy pulses, witnessing the first major success in humanity's fight. Earth had not only survived, it had fought back decisively. attackers retreated temporarily. Satellites monitored their movements, noting that they had pulled back to a distance, likely to analyze the unexpected resistance. Scientists studied the energy patterns, trying to predict when the attackers might return and how they might adapt. Engineers upgraded the hybrid systems further, integrating new discoveries from the fragments. Humanity was learning, improving, and becoming stronger with each encounter. Leaders called a global meeting to assess the situation. They realized that Earth had entered a new era. Humans were no longer passive observers of the universe. They were active participants capable of defending themselves. They discussed long-term strategies, combining research, military defense, and civilian preparedness. Everyone understood that the attacks could resume at any time, but humanity was no longer helpless. People around the world felt the change. They had survived direct attacks, rebuilt damaged cities, and contributed to the defense of their planet. Children learned from stories of bravery. Scientists and engineers continued their work, and communities remained vigilant. Humanity had transformed fear into action, confusion into strategy, and uncertainty into determination. The research teams made another breakthrough. They discovered that the fragments contained not only energy patterns, but also forms of intelligence that could be trained. By carefully controlling signals and energy flows, humans could influence the behavior of the fragments in ways that mimicked strategy and calculation. This allowed the hybrid systems to act more intelligently, anticipating attacks and responding faster than ever before. Earth's defenses had become dynamic, flexible, and adaptive. As weeks passed, humans continued to fortify their planet. Cities were protected with layered energy shields. Satellites broadcast continuous interference signals, and hybrid systems were distributed to critical areas. Military forces trained for every scenario, from direct assaults to long-range attacks. Ordinary citizens remained vigilant, ready to assist in any way needed. Humanity had learned that survival required everyone to be involved, and every person had a role. Then, one day, the attackers returned. This time, they moved differently. They were cautious, testing the defenses rather than attacking full force. Ships hovered at a distance, sending probes and energy pulses to assess the new systems. Humans watched closely, ready to respond. The hybrid systems and interference signals immediately disrupted the probes. Energy pulses sent from Earth caused the alien devices to malfunction, proving that humans had not only survived, but also adapted faster than the attackers anticipated. For the first time, the attackers hesitated. Their formations broke there. Probes failed, and their beams misfired. Humanity had turned the tables. Instead of being passive victims, humans had become active defenders, capable of strategy, anticipation, and innovation. The attackers had underestimated the creativity and resilience of Earth's inhabitants. People on the ground felt a new kind of hope. They had seen their planet survive and fight back. They had witnessed ordinary citizens, scientists, engineers, and soldiers working together to protect millions of lives. Humanity had learned that unity, intelligence, and courage were more powerful than fear. Every small action, every contribution mattered. Earth was no longer a helpless target. As the attackers retreated once again, humans understood a vital truth. The battle was not just about surviving attacks. It was about proving that humanity could defend itself, adapt, and thrive. Scientists continued studying fragments, engineers upgraded systems, and military forces refined strategies. Communities remained vigilant, teaching new generations how to act, respond, and think. Humanity had entered a new era of awareness, preparedness, and strength. At night, people looked up at the stars with pride and determination. They remembered the streaks of light, the vanished islands, the first attacks, and the courage of those who had defended Earth. Fear was still present, but it was balanced with hope, pride, and determination. Humanity had survived the unimaginable, learned from it, and turned fear